It's week 13 of the fantasy football season, and there's a lot to be thankful for. Like me watching these people golf behind me while I talk about the waiver wire. But that's not it. I'm also thankful that there's no flipping bye weeks in week 13. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today. Happy Thanksgiving week. Welcome to week 13 of your fantasy football season. The playoffs are right around the corner, and just like we always do here in the Waiver Wire Show, we're going to go through a few different things, some of the bigger injuries from just last week. How about some things that we learned from week 12? How about upcoming bye weeks? No, there are no upcoming bye weeks. Everybody is playing this week. Then we'll go ahead and dive into the waiver wire for each position. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defenses. There are timestamps down below if that's what you're looking for. But let's go ahead and start off with the top injuries from week 12. We had quite a few injuries, to say the least. How about Baker Mayfield? He suffered a stinger. He left the game, but the team was up by so many points, it wasn't that big of a deal at the time. Already come out and said that he should be good to go for week 13. How about Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders? He's dealing with a knee and an ankle injury as of right now. We already knew he wasn't even 100% entering the week. Now that we know he's dealing with more injuries, he could miss some time in Washington. Alongside his backfield teammate, Austin Eckler, who suffered a concussion. He's currently in the concussion protocol. How about David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions? A lot of people do not want to lose David Montgomery as of right now. He's dealing with a shoulder injury. Kind of sounds like an AC sprain. He may be able to play through it, but that's definitely somebody we're paying close attention to here this week. Josh Downs, also dealing with a shoulder injury, and they've already come out and said, listen, he's doubtful for week 13. We probably will not have Josh Downs. Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers, he's in the concussion protocol. And then Jatavian Sanders, tight end of the Carolina Panthers. He made a great play, but he came down and landed directly on his head. He was carted off the field. We may not have him this week as well. So as much as we hate to see injuries, at least we're not dealing with all these added injuries and a bunch of bye weeks. Next week could be a different story, but we'll talk about that later. But now let's go ahead and transition over into 5 things that we learned from week 12. The first thing, Saquon Barkley probably should be the RB1 in fantasy football drafts in 2025. He's only played 11 games in Philadelphia and already has a career high in rushing yards. He's also got the most total yards that he's had in a season since his rookie year. 180 plus total yards now in 4 of his last 6 games played, and now has multiple touchdowns in 3 of his last 4. Now yes, it sucks to lose touchdowns to tush pushes, but Saquon Barkley is still finding a way to eat in this offense. Okay, next thing up. How about this? Daniel Jones was not the only problem in New York. Sure, the Giants can release him and change to a different quarterback. They can bypass Drew Lock and go right to Tommy DeVito, and they're still gonna suck. This isn't an overall quarterback issue. We already know that Malik Neighbors is pissed. He's talking in the media. The fans are pissed. The organization is in shambles. As much as they really want to pinpoint things like on Daniel Jones, who, don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge Daniel Jones truther. It was not just his fault as to why this team was struggling. Next thing, Jalen Waddle is doing his best to suck us back in here at the end of the fantasy football season. He hadn't had over 60 yards receiving in a game since week 1, then comes out last week and has 8 catches for 144 yards and a touchdown. But we already know what his potential is in this offense. It's why he's been drafted highly in the past. It's why he continues to be ranked up inside the top 36 each week. When you play in an offense like this and have his type of talent, it can pop off at any time. But is this just going to suck us in for week 13? We're going to throw him in our lineups and he's absolutely going to blow again? Well, he's going up against Green Bay this week, and the last time he played Green Bay, he absolutely crushed them. So fingers crossed. All right. Next thing, how about the running back position when it comes to scoring is absolutely plummeting as of right now. Now, on average, we have right around 30 running backs a week that average right around 10 fantasy points per game. 2 weeks ago, that number dropped down to 20. Then last week, it went up to 22. And then this week, it was only 16 running backs that scored at least 10 fantasy points. Between injuries, bye weeks, and split backfields, We are running out of running back options every week that are putting up big time numbers. I'm seeing a lot of people in the comment section on social media, they're complaining about the production of their running backs. You're not alone. Everybody's out there. If you don't have Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Saquon Barkley, and a few others, you're probably struggling most weeks in fantasy football. We actually had somebody said, I'm dropping James Conner. I'm sick of the fantasy production. The dude sucked in week 12 and was still like a top 20 overall running back. So yes, it sucks. Scoring is down, but it's across the board. And then lastly, how about Brock Purdy is the key to the San Francisco 49ers offense. Purdy really makes this offense run, and he really doesn't get a lot of credit for it. They can have all the offensive talent in the world, but if he's not under center, I don't even think San Francisco's a playoff team without Brock Purdy, and he really does not get enough credit for what he does in this offense. We just saw San Francisco go out there this week and score the fewest amount of points in a regular season game since Brock Purdy took over. So you may think Brock Purdy is a game manager, but he makes that offense run in San Francisco. So all right, those are 5 things we learned in week 12. Now, typically we transition into this section of the show where we talk about the teams who are on upcoming bye and who we're not going to have at our disposal this week. But like we already mentioned, there are no bye weeks here on Thanksgiving week, which is good for sure. But we got 6 teams on bye next week, so that's definitely something to pay attention to and make sure you're prepared for. So let's go ahead and dive into the waiver wire and start off at the quarterback position. And I wanted to do it a little bit different here for the quarterback position this week. Obviously, with no bye weeks, all of our studs are going to be available. So I went through and listed all the quarterbacks that may be out there on your waiver wire. Maybe if you're in a 2-quarterback league or you need something different here this week due to a matchup. So we got Bo Nix. He's 79% owned now. Pretty highly owned. Not going to be out there for a lot of people, but he's going up against Cleveland here this week. This is more of a just in case, go check and find out, because he's the current quarterback 7 overall, averaging 18 fantasy points per game, has multiple touchdown passes now in 6 of his last 8 ball games. We already know that Cleveland is easier to throw on than they are to run on, and they're allowing right around 17 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. But be prepared, because next week, Bo Nix is on a bye week, so if you own Bo Nix, make sure you have a backup plan ready to go next week. Then we got Matthew Stafford going up against New Orleans. He's 59% owned as of right now. Since Puka and Kupp have returned, Stafford is the overall quarterback 5 in fantasy football, has 20 fantasy points now in 4 of his last 5 games played. He had 3 passing touchdowns the first 6 weeks of the season. Now he's had 12 passing touchdowns over the last 5 weeks alone. Matthew Stafford could definitely be an option out there for you if he's available. How about Geno Smith? He's 67% owned going up against the Jets. The current quarterback 13 overall, and the emergence of JSM is really helping his floor out each and every week. The whole revenge game narrative may be over with by this time because Geno's been away from the Jets for a long time. But Seattle is fighting for a chance at making the playoffs in a division that's super close. They gotta win ball games they can't afford to lose. Then we got Anthony Richardson, 59% owned going up against New England. And just like we said last week, if he doesn't find the end zone with his legs, he's a verge top 20 quarterback at best. Well, he didn't get the rushing touchdown in week 12, and he finished as the quarterback 19 overall. He remains a big-time boomer bust play and also has even a little bit more risk this week due to the injuries to Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr. Then we got Jameis Winston of the Browns. He's only 22% owned going up against Denver, and he didn't have a great game by any means in week 12, but he played one of the best defenses in the NFL in a snowstorm. He still has a fairly high floor, but this is another tough matchup for him this week going up against Denver. They allow the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. How about Caleb Williams? He's 53% owned going up against Detroit, and he finally threw for some touchdowns in an NFL game. Now, yes, it was a great matchup for him going up against Minnesota, and now he has a matchup going up against Detroit, who has been playing so much better here as of late against the pass. But we got to give a little bit of credit here to the Chicago offense. It has been better overall since the change at offensive coordinator. Now, after Caleb, we got Drake May. He's 31% owned going up against Indianapolis, and he's on a team that just doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. Drake May only has 1 game with multiple touchdown passes since week 3. But this is a good matchup for him going up against Indianapolis. However, he's on a bye week next week. So if you don't need Drake May, I'm not wasting a waiver wire pickup to get him. How about Derek Carr? He's 18% owned, and he's going up against the Rams. Coming off the bye week, and it's crazy how he's actually playing better with less pass catchers to throw the ball to. Back-to-back wins and averaging over 250 yards passing and 2 touchdowns in each of his last 2 games. All it takes is really one big play to MVS, and we know Derek Carr likes to throw the ball deep. If Matthew Stafford and the Rams can get out to an early lead, it's going to force Derek Carr to throw the ball for all 4 quarters. A little bit more of a dart throw, but an option if you need one. All right, now let's move on to the running back position, though, and this is where the waiver wire is the most bare. How about Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders? He's only 1% owned, and he's going up against Tennessee. With the injuries to Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler being in the concussion protocol, we could see Jeremy McNichols get the start in Week 13. Now, he hasn't really had a big opportunity before. However, this is somewhat of a revenge game. The only other time he's really had a role in the NFL was when he was a member of the Tennessee Titans, the team in which they're playing this week. But he is on bye next week, so if you do not need him this week, he may not be fantasy viable for very long. Now, after him, we got Amir Abdullah of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's 33% owned. A lot of people snatched him up last week when we talked about him. He's going up against Kansas City. And this is really just a horrible matchup. He's going up against one of the best overall run defenses in the NFL in the Kansas City Chiefs. And Amir Abdullah is super touchdown and target dependent. Now, given that everyone pretty much is hurt in Las Vegas, we don't even know for sure who's playing quarterback yet. He could be worth a dart throw in PPR leagues, but he's going to need a lot of volume. Then we got Kenneth Gainwell going up against Baltimore. He's 6% owned, and we all know that Saquon Barkley just cannot be stopped. But every single week, Kenneth Gainwell is getting a few touches here and there. Now, he's more of a handcuff at this point of the season, but on a team that runs so much and so successfully, he isn't a bad bench ad here just in case. But there's really not much else out there on the waiver wire that's readily available anyway. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. First one, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's 35% owned going up against the Rams. And I saw a lot of people drop him in leagues last week just due to the bye week. Now, he's had 196 yards and 3 touchdowns over his last 2 games. The volume isn't great, but we know that New Orleans loves to throw the ball deep, and MVS is really all they got to go downfield to. How about Noah Brown of the Washington Commanders? He's going up against Tennessee. He's 19% owned. Sure, he drops the ball from time to time, but he is the true second wide receiver option in this Washington offense. If you don't need him this week, though, I'm leaving him on waivers because he's on bye next week. How about Jerry Jeudy going up against Denver? Now, he's 74% owned, pretty highly owned, but I wanted to include him here just in case in the revenge game going up against Denver, because he's really turned into the number 1 option here for Jameis Winston in Cleveland, especially since Cedric Tillman is in concussion protocol. Now, this is not an easy matchup whatsoever going up against Denver. However, I'm hoping for more slot snaps going the way of Jerry Jeudy and for him to get maybe a touchdown opportunity or 2 against his former team. How about David Moore of the Carolina Panthers? Only 1% owned going up against Tampa Bay. And it's really impossible to trust any wide receiver in Carolina. Right now, it seems like David Moore may be the volume option here in the short term, though. And it's a great matchup going up against Tampa Bay. They allow a ton of fantasy points each week to fantasy wide receivers, but we also need to mention Adam Thielen as well. Now, he's 45% owned going up against Tampa Bay as well. First game back last week, and he didn't look half bad, but he only played in 60% of the snaps. Now, he could turn into a late season safety blanket for Bryce Young, who actually looked pretty decent here last week. How about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine next of the Tennessee Titans, 21% owned, going up against Washington. Now, he is highly, and I mean highly touchdown dependent, and at some point, he isn't going to get one. He's had touchdowns in 6 of his last 7 games, but he's only gone over 50 yards receiving 1 time all year. This is a good matchup for him, though, going up against Washington, so he could be a low-end flex play if needed. How about Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts going up against New England? Now, Josh Downs is hurt, and he's unlikely to play already. We know that Michael Pittman isn't 100% healthy, which means more targets are going to have to go the way of Alec Pierce here in the foreseeable future. Now, he is a big play receiver, but he definitely could benefit from more volume here the next couple weeks. However, he is another one of these guys who will be on bye next week. So if you do not need him here this week, I'm probably looking elsewhere. Now, after him, we got Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills. He's still 61% owned, and he's going up against San Francisco this week. They're coming off the bye, but we're really waiting to hear whether or not he's progressed through this this wrist injury. A lot of people have dropped him here as of late though, but with the chance of a return here in the near future, he's a little bit more of a speculative add if you have the bench space. How about Calvin Austin of the Pittsburgh Steelers? Only 4% owned going up against Cincinnati. And we've talked about him quite a bit here this year. He's like the RC Cola version of Tyler Lockett in this offense. But Russell Wilson is giving him shots deep down the field multiple times each week. Now a good matchup going up against Cincinnati. A little bit more of a boom or bust option if needed. And then Devon Vele of the Denver Broncos, he's 13% owned going up against Cleveland. And outside of Courtland Sutton, we have seen Vele be the next best pass catching option in Denver. 8+ fantasy points in 3 straight games. Bo Nix is playing great. We just saw Vele get a season high in targets, and Cleveland is easier to throw on than run on, but another one of these guys on the waiver wire who will be on bye next week. So if you don't immediately need him this week, I'm probably looking elsewhere as well. So all right, let's move on to the tight end position now. And at the top of the list, we got Taysom Hill. Now, he's currently 63% owned, but he needs to be 100% owned. I've mentioned him for multiple weeks, and some of you got him on his bye week last week, so great job at being proactive. But with the way that the tight end position is so wishy-washy, you might as well take a chance on a guy that can win you your weekly matchup. On a team with limited offensive weapons, in a matchup going up against the Rams, who could easily put up points on the Saints, forcing New Orleans to try to play from behind, Taysom Hill is a great option, and he's going to be my SeatGeek pickup of the week. Now, I've been talking about SeatGeek here for a couple weeks, and I've already heard from a couple people that have checked off some Christmas presents off their list by getting some tickets to events through SeatGeek. They're not some random ticketing app. They are the #1 rated ticketing app right now with over 28 million downloads. There are currently over 70,000 events on SeatGeek, and I guarantee that you have someone in your family or a friend that you need to buy a Christmas present for. You get to check off your Christmas list that you've already purchased some presents for some loved ones. But you can also purchase a ticket for yourself, take that loved one, and benefit from the Christmas present as well. Now, SeatGeek makes it easy. They pull tickets from all across the web. They put them in one place so you can verify you're getting a good deal. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so just look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. But you better believe I'm also going to give you a discount. Don't worry, I won't tell your loved one that you got it for cheaper. If you use the promo code Headliners at SeatGeek, you're going to get $20 off. That's right, $20 off your first purchase with promo code Headliners. Be sure to check out the link in the description for more information. But all right, back to some more tight ends. And next on the list, we got Jonnu Smith. Now, he's highly owned. He's 75% owned. We've been talking about him for weeks. He's going up against Green Bay this week. And who would have thought that Jonnu Smith would be the most consistent pass catcher in the Miami offense for the bulk of the season? But he's up to the current tight end 4 overall on the year. Highly owned, but look just in case. Then we got Zach Ertz going up against Tennessee. He's 63% owned. He's the tight end 8 on the year, and he's not even 65% owned. He's had 7+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games, touchdowns now in back-to-back ball games. He's the Jaden Daniels safety blanket each week. Another one of these guys, though, who will be on bye next week. So even if you own Zach Ertz, be sure to have a backup plan just in case. How about Noah Gray of the Kansas City Chiefs? Only 6% owned going up against Las Vegas. Travis Kelce, who? Defenses are just forgetting about Noah Gray at this point. He's had back-to-back games with 4 receptions and has 4 touchdowns over his last 2 games played. Now a matchup going up against Las Vegas, they absolutely struggle against opposing tight ends. How about Patty F, Pat Freiermuth going up against Cincinnati? He's 45% owned as of right now, and a little bit more of a lower end option, but he does have a great matchup going up against Cincinnati, who allows top 5 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. And then lastly, it's Theo Johnson of the New York Giants, only 6% owned going up against Dallas. Now, he's had 6 targets in 3 straight ball games, but the quarterback play is just so hard to trust in New York. He really needs a touchdown, but you have to expect that the Giants are going to be trailing and throwing in this game, which opens up the likelihood that Theo Johnson could get some targets, maybe even some in the red zone. Which only leaves us some streaming Ds now. How about the Colts defense? They're only 5% owned. They're going up against the Patriots. And between the pressure that Indianapolis can get on the quarterback and New England being such a low-scoring offense, the Colts are an option here this week. How about the Seattle Seahawks going up against the Jets? The Seattle defense looked great in Week 12, and the word great hasn't been used in the same sentence as the Jets in ages. Then we also have the Bucs defense, 35% owned, going up against Carolina. And even though Bryce Young looked a little bit better in Week 12, you have to expect Tampa Bay to try to disrupt him and force turnovers in this ball game. Tampa Bay still trying to win ball games there in that division. All right, so there you have the Week 13 waiver wire show. It's a little bit bare right now, right when there's no teams on a bye. It's really hard to find quality options on the waiver wire. And just like I've told multiple people this year, this may be the thinnest overall waiver wire season long that we've seen in our 8+ years of doing this show. Now, I do want to take a quick second to be sure to wish everyone out there once again a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you're able to have a great week, find some good Black Friday deals as well. I'll continue to be out here in Arizona through next Tuesday, then we're back at home, back to the grind, we're back to winning fantasy championships. But I'm gonna go ahead and get after the day. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.